Excuse me, cat was jumping around.
Welcome to the AI Business Podcast. I'm Tian, the creative producer of Informa Tech, and joining me today is the man who doesn't celebrate the 4th of July. He is the global editor of AI Business, Max Smolax.
Hello there.
Are you okay? Why are you holding your headphone?
Because it's just like I'm trying to stick it into my ear because it don't work properly.
Welcome to the Amateur Hour.
Also joining me is the man who lives inside his secure bunker with no AC but lots of good food prepared. He is deputy editor of DCD, Sebastian Moss.
Hello, everybody. We've made it halfway through the year. We're still alive. This is good.
And on episode 5, we talk about part 2 of US versus Huawei, although this time actually is UK versus Huawei. And AI in space, the new spacesuit. The race between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, who's winning, and a data center on Mars. I actually don't want to work there. And we debut a fun segment, The Machine Says What? Where we use our best judgment to discern whether a quote comes from a famous human being or a stone-cold algorithm. Lots of stuff to go through, but just want to jump right in. And friend of the podcast, Eli Showalter, volunteered to design a logo for the podcast. So for about a week, we had that logo, which is kind of a light purple with the retro, but also futuristic, a 2D design of like a brand, like a mechanical brand. So if you see color changing on your podcast app or a logo changed for that matter, that's his work. So for about a week or so until we're told that we got to switch it back. So
all art is ephemeral, and we liked it when it lasted. And hopefully it will return.
Check out his website, eli.show, if you're interested in his work. And we don't really promote this podcast, but this is where I remind everybody to kind of just, if you can, or if you want to leave a comment, just tweet at Sebastian Moss or Max. Leave me alone, but definitely check out, AI Business.
Have we reached that stage now? Are we just like and subscribe? Like and subscribe.
Well, episode 5. Don't you think it's time for us to at least speak to our listener and see what they're made of? Because apparently we have a couple of people over 60s, in their 60s, listening to the podcast on Spotify.
The Silver Surfers, yes. And if you have a motorcycle to sell,
Man, AI is for everybody. We can explain AI for people who grew up in a world that wasn't as, mutilated by AI.
We want to hear from the listeners. So reach out to us, give us a good rating, and, subscribe and, and all that kind of stuff. So this is the only time, one of the few times you'll catch us promoting the podcast on the podcast. So now we can move on to the extra topic.
And now, for our first item, we're going to talk about a story that comes from the UK, which is local, but has global implications and kind of goes to show the weird trade war disconnect that's going on. Oliver Dowden, who's the culture secretary in the UK, sort of told the Guardian newspaper that UK is close to a U-turn on Huawei. So as you might remember, UK was under a lot of pressure, UK government, to follow the American example and blacklist equipment from Chinese vendor Huawei and its 5G networks. US did it, but some of its allies broke rank. So, for example, Germany didn't do it, ditto for France. I think Australia took more of an American position. So, but the idea is UK was cut in the middle, and after lots of investigations, deliberations, group therapy meetings, they finally decided that no, Huawei was legit. It was sinking a ton of money into the UK. It was one of the few technological friends we had, and that we would not bar them from our 5G networks. There is some kind of conditions attached, but the idea was that, Huawei is okay. Meanwhile, last week, the culture secretary might not be aware of this. Huawei announced that they just received green light to build a campus, not just a campus, but a giant complex with manufacturing facilities worth at least 1 billion in the first stage. It's a giant campus in Cambridge with research and development manufacturing facilities expecting to employ around 400 people across 50,000 square meters. You don't chuck a company which is doing this out of the country, and you don't impose any conditions on its business. I mean, that's just unreasonable. So I think, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, but Huawei has received green light to build this campus. They've been talking about this for a while. They are making the investment, and the truth of the matter is, after Brexit, we will need projects like that, so we can't really say no.
I think the Cambridge link is particularly interesting. Obviously, there's a reason, just simply because that's where a lot of talent is in the UK. but Huawei's always had a weird link with Cambridge. They earlier this
Mm.
year it came out that they gave Cambridge University a bunch of money to write a study that essentially said like Huawei's great. They had a lot of ties to British universities that recently people have started to unpick and go, oh, where is that technology going?
So yeah, and so to make it a lot more comfortable, but the thing is that UK is torn between sort of like like the sort of like the interest of maintaining relationships with the US and China at the same time, and it's just like in the words of Prez from The Wire, in a trade conflict, well, I apply it to trade conflict. No one wins. One side just loses more slowly.
For the sake of listeners, Max doesn't watch The Wire. He's just trying to keep up with us. So
We're
that's
doing
why he's.
Wired quotes. I've done a quote, okay?
I'll give you points for trying. Here's another quote for you. Pablo Escobar. He famously said, "Everyone has a price. The important thing is to find out what it is." So, do you think Huawei has found out the price for UK?
I think so. I mean, for years they've been very, very close to the UK government. Like the UK operation was handled by a lord, and every year they hold this giant sort of like shindig in Whitehall, sort of like right next to the Parliament, where they invite again a bunch of politicians, journalists, and they basically like strut their stuff and tell you how much they're investing in the UK and how fantastic their connections are, and how, like sort of like long may she reign. And in the current climate, they're still doing that. And I think they need the UK as a beachhead on the continent. We need them as a manufacturer with a UK presence. So it's going to be very interesting how we're going to navigate relationship with America around this.
Well, I mean, it all ties back to Brexit and the fact that the UK has to start making trade decisions on its own.
Mm.
But it's also, so with that annual banqueting thing at banqueting house. So I've been to several, and I remember going to one before the Brexit vote, and they had harp players and pictures of Ren Zhengfeng, the founder of Huawei, walking hand in hand with David Cameron and George Osborne, so the previous Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer. And it was very much, like you said, they pulled out all these MPs, they pulled out lords and stuff that they now had on their payroll, and it was very much, look how much power we have, we own all these people. And it was just proud and open. Then we went to one like quite soon after Brexit vote, a whole bunch of political changes. Everything was in chaos in Britain, and they didn't have any lovely harp players, and they didn't have any slideshows. And then they brought out an MP, and she was just like, "Oh, I'd never actually heard of Huawei before coming to this this dinner." It was less that they had messed up. It was more that the British establishment was going through such a difficult and confused phase that they didn't even know who they were meant to be lobbying. And it's kind of been downhill since then. Everything involving the British government right now and involving Huawei is very painful. So actually brings us on to the next story about the UK government that I wanted to talk about, which is the OneWeb saga. It's a weird one. So back in March, OneWeb, which is this satellite company, they were about to get $2 billion from their main backer, SoftBank. COVID happens, the economy's tanking. SoftBank's made a whole bunch of other poor investments. So
Shout out to SoftBank.
Whoa!
Yeah, I mean, their bank is looking softer every day because so they were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't. So they pull out last minute of a $2 billion funding round in OneWeb, and OneWeb realizes we don't actually have a plan for this. We're just burning money. Space is very expensive. So they declare bankruptcy in March. Quietly, things chug along, and then this week we hear, guess who's bidding for them? The British government. The British government wants a 20% stake in OneWeb, and you're like, well, why? The British government's, it's right wing. It's not really into nationalisation. It's not really into owning things. But it again goes back to the Brexit vote. So pre-Brexit, EU is building a big competitor to GPS, which is owned by the US military. So the Galileo project, and Britain, as part of the EU, spent £1.2 billion, just under $1.5 billion on Galileo, and they had UK companies involved. There was 2 security monitoring centres, one in Hampshire. Then they vote to leave the EU. EU says, hey, well, you're no longer part of the EU, you can't take part in Galileo. So all that investment has gone down the drain. That centre has moved to Spain. So the UK spends another 90 million working out how much it would cost to build their own Galileo GPS type thing. And the ultimate bill comes back as £5 billion. So they're like, we're not doing this. So they think they can buy OneWeb and kind of short circuit, do a shortcut to get in their own GPS competitor. There's one problem though. The satellites are wrong.
What do you mean?
So GPS, Galileo, GLONASS, Beidou, or Russian, China's ones, they all orbit medium Earth orbit around 20,000 kilometers. That's how, like, the way we know how to do GPS type tracking systems are at 20,000 kilometers. OneWeb is in low Earth orbit at 1,200 kilometers, which is a very big difference. And there is no guarantee and no real idea, and most of the scientists that have spoken publicly since this news broke don't really see how you can build a GPS type system from OneWeb satellites. So the British government is bidding to buy a 20% stake in a bankrupt company to build a project that might not be feasible.
Recipe for success.
Yay.
It's really beautiful. So you might have noticed that we talk about space a lot, and that's because it's an interesting subject. I believe personally that it's a viable kind of business vertical, that you can operate in, and I'm sure many of you are gonna agree. And you can do many serious things with AI in space.
Amazon claim it's serious, and they made this big thing this week saying they've launched a whole division of their cloud computing service, Amazon Web Services, for space. The Amazon Web Services, Aerospace, and Satellite Solutions. But the problem is that acronym is AWS ASS. And it's led by the guy who helped set up Space Force, which has its own joke Netflix series and lots of people make fun of. So you've got the ASS Force, Amazon service. So I don't know if everyone takes it seriously, Max.
Okay, no, but there are serious applications. So earlier this week we found out that NASA's using AI, sort of like two AI techniques, to create the new spacesuit. So they're doing it the first time in 40 years. They're calling it XEMU. So like the giant flightless bird, and it's part of the Artemis mission, which is supposed to put people on the moon by 2024. Not just men, but this time women too, which is going to be pretty cool. They need a cool spacesuit, which, there's a lot of things to take care of. Like people need to sort of it needs to support temperature, oxygen. It needs to be powered, support communications. It needs to allow people to go to the toilet. There's, many different things it needs to do. So to design the thing, they used AI models, and they used two techniques. They used generative adversarial networks, in which essentially two models compete against each other, just squaring off and seeing who can create the better design, and then kind of consistently refining this process. And they've also used a system which tries to emulate sort of natural selection by creating generations of algorithms, kind of taking and picking out best features of several, and then combining them into new algorithms, and then running them again and seeing who's better again. So that's very interesting. And apparently, it really sped up process on the thing. Artemis mission is going live in 2024, so there's no time to lose.
So what are we looking at in terms of the newly designed spacesuit? Like what would make it stand out compared to the legacy design, so to speak?
I mean, it still looks clunky. So SpaceX, for example, they get more props for design, but I would argue that's because they hired designers and are more about PR, whereas NASA's more hard science. I mean, the main thing is don't die. You don't want to kill someone on the moon.
Yeah, I would say that's the number one priority.
Yeah, my perspective, as long as it doesn't kill someone, they've done a good job. But really, movement, durability, making like someone can stay out longer. These are all really important things, because every time they leave their spacecraft to go and walk around on the moon, it's a huge risk, and the more they can do in that single journey, the better. Hopefully, this version is a little bit more flexible.
If they did it on the tech with sort of like compute power of calculators, right? Then surely this is a no-brainer now, when it's just like the science and technology, material science is much more advanced.
You'd think. I mean, but NASA was much larger then. It had much more of the national effort, much more of, if you were the smartest person in your school, you wanted to work at NASA. Now, if you're the smartest person in your school, you probably want to work at Google.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to talk about Cold War again, but it just feels like
we're always coming back.
Everything's the Cold War.
That part of competition is over. Now we're just like dragging our feet, like let's just do it again. But it doesn't have the momentum as it was in '69. Like as we were trying so hard to come together.
Well, what's fascinating is because we've been to the moon before, many times. Obviously, it'll be a big deal still, and it'll be great to have a woman up there. But it's something we've done before. I'm more excited about the things we haven't done before, and that's where AI will really play a part, because the moon is close. you could have most of your computing power on the Earth and have just dumb devices on the moon that just constantly communicate with the Earth and all the processing's there. But let's say we have someone on Mars. Well, at our best, at the closest, it's 6 minutes just to send a thing there, 6 minutes back. At the worst case, when Mars is furthest away, it's 40 minutes. You can't operate stuff like that. So you will need your AI systems on Mars, and you need all your computing power on Mars. But obviously, you don't want your thing to be heavy because you have to shoot it off the planet. You don't want it to use up a lot of power because you need to find that power from somewhere. You don't want it to have like weird heat distribution. You don't want it to be like weak and suffer from like any kind of environmental factors. So you have to build really cool hardware that works really efficiently with really efficient AI systems.
We choose to build a data center in Mars not because it's easy, because it's hard.
Yeah, and because if we're going to build a civilization on Mars, we're going to need internet. Although then that comes into the whole question of how do you handle the internet? Because if I go on Reddit, or we have this conversation, we expect almost zero latency. And if I go on Reddit, I expect it to be the closest version of Reddit to now. And if I go on Twitter, I expect it to be the most recent version. If you've got 40-minute latency back and forth, or 80-minute back and forth, you're going to have a whole separate internet.
Okay, here's my plug for The Expanse. So, like, colonies at Mars, latency very much part of the storyline. If you haven't seen The Expanse, it's a very good show.
And it's also owned by Amazon, just like AWS ass.
Tian mentioned Cold War, and I'm just thinking, is the next Cold War being fought between Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk? Is that what it is?
Okay, so I'm no fan of Jeff Bezos, and as long as this podcast go on, I will criticize him about the way he treats his workers and the way his wealth is distributed. But Elon Musk criticizes him a lot and calls him a copycat. Blue Origin was founded before SpaceX. Just putting that out there.
Right, totally.
Set the record straight.
Setting the record straight. Blue Origin had the first rocket to go up, come back down, and then be able to go back up again. Didn't go as high, I'll give him that. He also has the most phallic rockets. But by far, like I've studied all the rockets, it's the most phallic. Again, though, the caveat is SpaceX has to operate as a business.
How would you classify Blue Origin then?
Blue Origin is a pet project by the world's richest man to help him be even richer. I mean, if you go look at his old university thesis, it was about building civilizations in space and turning Earth into a big nature reserve. I doubt he still thinks like that, considering what Amazon does to the Earth. But he definitely likes space, and that predates Elon Musk. I mean, Amazon is doing a lot in space. It's got Kuiper, which is 3,200 odd satellites it wants to put around the Earth so that we all have internet. They have Amazon ground station, so it's essentially giant satellite dishes around the Earth where all the satellites up above can connect down. So when they need to communicate with the Earth, they do it via Amazon, and then automatically get funneled into Amazon Web Services facilities.
So Max mentioned that the war between two of them. So it's, in your estimation, it's not even a close one then?
SpaceX went with the Maverick route, which I appreciate. They went for like, we'll do this all ourselves. Blue Origin currently is much more, we're going to work with the military industrial complex. They've got a lot of partnerships with Lockheed, ILA.
And that's a good plan.
He had an affair. He got divorced. This week is the other milestone that after giving his now ex-wife $30-odd billion, he has regained all that wealth and is worth over $170 billion. So this episode is dedicated to him. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jeff.
So this game is called The Machine Says What? It's a game where we read quotes, and then Max and Seb are going to discern to the best of their ability whether it is a machine-generated quote or is said by some famous human being. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Participation in self-destruction is hard if you trust your friends.
Participation in self... Ooh.
That sounds like Inspire-a-Bot to me.
I mean, it sounds like they fed it lots of Chinese proverbs, and then it kind of spat this. I'm going robot.
Robot.
It is a robot.
Do we win anything, by the way?
You earn my respect, I guess.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean much, but Max doesn't have cash. Even when we have physical hardships, we can be very happy.
Are these like really big quotes, and everyone listen to this? It's like laughing that we can't
Mother
get these.
Teresa, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just like meh. No, I say that was a human. That sounds kind of like more than that. I would say that's a religious person talking. I recognize the signs.
I'm going to say robot, but mainly just so that I'm giving a different answer to Max.
That one is set by the Dalai Lama.
Ah, damn
There
it.
we go, religious leader. Told you.
Your laptop can protest against kins,
Kin.
human or machine.
Ah.
Kins.
I mean, that could have been said by one of those Silicon Valley people that thinks they're a robot.
Could be.
No, I'm sticking to my robot guns. I see robots everywhere.
I think it's a robot. Yeah.
That is a robot.
Whoop whoop.
And you cannot have the therapy without the invasion of privacy.
Did Google itself write this?
Human.
Yeah. Ooh. Is that from a terms and conditions written by a human? I'm going human.
That is a machine-generated quote.
Ooh.
Inspirobot in full action.
That is not inspiring. That is terrifying, Inspirobot.
The roots of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation for goodness.
I think that sounds like bullshit. I say machine. It's nonsensical, but
Yeah, go robot.
And that one is from Dalai Lama.
Damn it. Hey, we can do a podcast on like my problems with the Dalai Lama, but that'll be next episode. Subscribe.
This is a good one. Cat ladies become cat ladies out of insecurity.
Oh, that's a cruel one.
that sounds like AI to me.
I mean, Max, you are a cat lady.
No, is that cat ladies or cat girls? Because that's two different things.
Cat lady.
I mean, it feels like something some like mean blogger would write. So I'm gonna go human.
That is a machine-generated quote.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm worried now because, like, as someone that makes money from writing, they're getting too good.
Do not compare yourself to others. If you do so, you're insulting yourself.
Oh, that's I know this. That's human. I'm sure.
I'm voting machine as well.
You're a voting machine.
Yes, that's bullshit.
I'm going with human.
Do you want to take a step further and identify that human, or you're good? Just human.
It sounds Bible-y.
Oh, gosh.
But
It's set by the Führer himself, Adolf Hitler.
oh wow. I apologize to our Christian audience.
Long live the walls we crashed through.
Long live the. Is this what Mexico said to Donald Trump after he wanted to build it? I'm gonna go robot.
Robot.
Taylor Swift.
God damn it!
What?
I clearly, my years as a Taylor Swift reporter have not helped me.
Wars build bridges into unexplored regions.
Ooh, is this like a Churchill?
Pretentious human.
Yeah, human that gets to send people to war but doesn't need to go to war himself.
There you go. Another Adolf.
Oh god, I'm very because we just before this podcast started, we saw you gonna go to your bookshelf and take off a book. Should we be worried?
Dancing and prostitution are two sides of the same coin.
Shitty human.
It's a deep one.
That definitely wasn't Taylor Swift. Human.
Human.
It's machine.
Ah,
And they're learning. They're getting good.
they are getting
Yes.
good. Right? I didn't
They're
know they're like
getting
judgmental.
Yeah, no, I didn't know they're hating on cat ladies and dancers. Take it easy.
Yeah, you can't go out and have fun. You can't stay at home and play with your cat. Like what? What do you want from us?
If we all believe in ourselves, we can make morons feel confused.
If we all believe in ourselves, we could make more than feel confused.
That
Robot.
sounds like
Yeah.
It's a robot. That was too easy. I'm intimidated by the fear of being average.
I'm intimidated by the fear of being average. Oh. Yeah, I think this is a smart AI.
human.
Human? What make you say that, Max?
I don't know. It sounds pretentious, but it sounds like something a person would say. You know, like sort of like somebody who aspires to greatness.
And I think it's an AI that uses like they've got a pattern of using like synonyms and then having a little reverse section at the end.
Very good. Very interesting. And this one is definitely said by somebody who's achieved greatness. She is, again, Taylor
Oh,
Swift.
damn it! Are we sure she's not?
No, we're not sure.
Are we 100 like all celebrities go through such a process of manufacturing that
True.
yeah. So I'm sticking by my guns and saying that was still an AI.
if we're on the subject of AI constructs saying terrible, unspeakable things, a very interesting story was reported this week by the Register, where I used to work for all of 5 months once. Katia,
Sorry for another time.
yeah, absolutely. But Katiana Catch, sort of like with their wonderful AI reporter, has unearthed that tiny images, a library that of tiny images that has been used by many people in machine learning to build their models, is racist and sexist and is generally is not a very good model to use. So tiny images is a data set containing 80 million images. They're fairly small, but they have labels attached, right? So the idea is if you need to train your project into something, you just grab like whatever corresponds to a certain tag. Like let's say you need to recognize oranges, you just grab thousands of images of oranges, run them through the system, voila, your model can now recognize an orange. Now, the library was hosted by MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, but the truth is, because it's so expansive, nobody really looked at whether it contains any explicit materials.
Okay.
And it turns out that it does. So somebody says some of the experiments started surfacing, like the N-word on black people. Like it was labeling women as bitches and hoes, and it did things that were even worse. Like sort of like labeling people as child molesters, rape suspects. Turns out when they were building tiny images, they needed a pretty big dictionary of words people actually use. And in the 1980s, somebody built this thing called WordNet, which is basically, again, a giant database of words with their associations. So like it's just like evidently at some point tagged by people. But the idea was it just like it kind of like it understands which words relate to which words. So they took WordNet and used that as the basis of tiny images. And it turns out people are not nice. Maybe some aspects of spoken language shouldn't be transferred to AI models, and this is a very good example of of using data, not knowing where it comes from, and baking in bias, baking in sort of like racism into artificial intelligence constructs. MIT has pulled the dataset down. They've apologized. The Register didn't do all the legwork on this. We have to thank Vinay Prabhu and Abiba Birani. So they're academics. They poured the database in question, and they have very interesting graphs with the incidence of these terrible words in the data set, and it's just like there's hundreds of them. They're pretty nasty. If you want to check it out, click on the link and find the Register story.
Actually, the whole thing though does remind me of back in 2013, back when IBM Watson was meant to be this big AI groundbreaking thing. It just won Jeopardy, and everyone was well excited, and obviously it turned out to be a bit of a damn squib. But at the time, they're like, how do we make this robot sound less robotic? How do we make it understand slang? And they downloaded the entire Urban Dictionary, clearly didn't read it, and put it into Watson. And then if anyone knows Urban Dictionary, what it's essentially, again, crowdsourced. It's a way of explaining slang. So obviously language is a fluid thing, and as new words come in, people put it into there. But because anyone can put anything into there, and most slang is insults, problem was, by the time they realized it wasn't like a Control Z type thing, or Control Z for you Americans. And it was a multi-week, many people team slowly going through the code and removing all the slurs and filtering out all the Urban Dictionary. I think in the end they didn't actually remove it all, they just filtered it out, so it's still in there. It's still thinking those racist thoughts and those rude thoughts. It just filters it out and doesn't say it to you. So it's
so it's like a real human being.
Yeah,
in some way.
Magnificent. I'd like to believe that like the job of a writer, like a content creator for all of us is fairly future proof.
I think human written content will be better than AI written content, but readers might not care enough to support human written content.
Boom, boom, boom.
Where can people find you guys online on the wonderful world of internet?
Well, I am active on Twitter and not very active on Instagram because I can't figure out what I'm supposed to be posting in lockdown. But other than that, AI Business, where we have news every single day, as well as some decent white papers. We've got the practitioner portal.
I just imagine you looking at Instagram feed and wondering what you're gonna post next, and you just realize your life is not that exciting. You just didn't post anything.
Yeah, it's just like this weird millennial anxiety. Screw this.
And you can find me having a social media existential crisis at Seth Moss. That's where you can find us all. Can we also have a shout out to Tien, because he you gave a shout out to the designer at the beginning. Tien's the one that edits this podcast. He's the one that, like, we had to pause in the middle because it started raining so loud that we couldn't hear Max speak, and he'll be the one editing that. Like, shout out to him.
Yeah. She's got, like, I believe, like 3 hours, which is going to be edited down to whatever you're going to see in front of you. So thanks, Tien.